Hi brothers and sisters, Naomi back for another video. If I can pull this study together, the day I was studying it, I was flying high because it was just showing me so many things. Just simply by reading the passages, I find scriptures have just opened up. Every chapter I read now, I understand it with a clarity that I never did. So the passages that I want to share with you has to do with dust and ashes. And so we're going to link one of my favorite, actually two of my favorite passages together. And that is Psalm 68 and Isaiah 29. Now, let's start with the very first part of, let me see here. Yeah, let's start with Isaiah 29. And what we're going to do with these two passages, and we may link it to two other passages, we may or may not. It depends on how it goes. Isaiah 29, Psalm 68, and we're going to read through them, and then we're going to read parts out of them and bring them together, hopefully, okay? So Isaiah 29 says, "Woe to Ariel, the city where David dwelt. Add ye year to year, let them kill sacrifices." Okay, so we're talking about Ariel, okay, which was another name for Jerusalem, which we know is Mount Zion, right? Zion. And verse 2 says this, "Yet I will distress Ariel, and there shall be heaviness and sorrow, and it shall be unto me as Ariel." Now, I did a poem a while ago. It was only 2 minutes and 28 seconds long on this particular thing here, because another rendering of it says, "Yet I will besiege Ariel, she will mourn and lament, and she will be to me like an altar hearth." All right. So the idea here is that she's going to become a sacrifice in some way. Isn't that what that sounds like? "Yet I will besiege Ariel, she will mourn and lament, and she will be to me like an altar hearth." So it takes us to that heifer which was burned, her ashes, right? The ashes of the heifer was what was used to purify the temple and to purify anyone who had touched the dead, and for other things. And so here we have ashes, in a sense, because we're looking at an altar hearth. Now, let me see here. What did I write down for words? Because it's an Ariel. So Ariel's name, I believe, what is it, 740 or 741? Let me see. Did I write them out correctly? All right. I didn't write them down, because at the time I thought, gee, if I do a video I'll remember all of this detail, but you got so much detail going on in your brain, it's just, and you keep moving on and connecting, and then you're like, well, I could do a video on this, and I could do a video on that, and I do. 740. Number 740 is Ariel here. "Yet I will distress Ariel." That's number 740 in your Hebrew concordance, and it's a symbolic name for Jerusalem. All right. Now the second Ariel is, some suggest that it's actually number 741, which it'll link you to 2025 or 2025. And it when you go to 2025, because that's what I use to look at 741, because that's what it tells you to do. It means the altar of burnt offering, which in symbology is what the heifer is. And the heifer, as I've come to understand, actually represents Israel. All right? The sacrifice of Israel. All right? To bring about the Son. All right? In a sense, that's what we're looking at. Okay. So there's two Ariels here. And one is the name for Jerusalem, but the other one means an altar hearth, or the altar of burnt offering. Okay. Now, where am I going with this? Well, okay. It says, Yet I will distress Ariel, and there shall be heaviness and sorrow, and it shall be unto me as Ariel. And I will camp against thee round about, and will lay siege against thee with a mount, and I will raise forts against thee. So she's coming against her. Verse 4. Now, I did a video on this verse, but it shocked me when I got looking up particular words in Psalm 68. Because this is what it says. It says, And thou shalt be brought down, and shall speak out of the ground, and thy speech shall be low out of the dust. Sorry about that. And thy voice shall be as of one that had the familiar spirit out of the ground, and thy speech shall whisper out of the dust. So what are we looking at? Well, we're looking at Ariel, right? She's talking about besieging Ariel. She's talking about sacrificing her on an altar hearth, wherein she becomes ashes and dust. And then in verse 4 you have, And thou shalt be brought down, and shalt speak out of the ground, and thy speech shall be low out of the dust. And thy voice shall be as of one that hath a familiar spirit out of the ground, and thy speech shall whisper out of the dust. So what are you looking at? You're looking at the rebirth of Israel out of the ashes. That's what that's saying, right? And we're going to connect that because it says it in Psalm 68. It says the same thing, but they hide it in the words. Okay, verse 5. Moreover, the multitude of thy strangers shall be like small dust, and the multitude of the terrible ones shall be as chaff that passes away. Yea, it shall be at an instant, suddenly. Wow, suddenly. Okay, I'm just making sure I'm not losing anything here. Thou shalt be visited of the Lord of hosts with thunder and with earthquakes and great noise, with storm and tempest and the flame of devouring fire. And the multitude of the nations that fight against Ariel, against her daughters of Zion, is really what we're looking at now. Even all that fight against her admonition and that distress her shall be as a dream of the night. Oh, really? A dream of the night. Now, that's going to take us to another passage. All right. Yeah. Okay, so I do have it there. Verse 8, It shall even be as when an hungry man dreameth, and beholdeth, he eateth, but he awaketh, and his soul is empty. Or as when a thirsty man dreameth, and behold, he drinketh, but he awaketh, and behold, he is faint, and his soul has appetite. So shall the multitude of all the nations be that fight against the mount of Zion. Now we're talking about the daughter Zion, all right? Now, if you've been following me, you know that in the beginning, Adam rejected a covenant with the righteous spirit and made one with the harlot spirit. And that covenant come to look like Old Testament law. And we're told in Galatians 4 that these two women are an allegory to two covenants. Two covenants, because women represents the spirit. Now remember, the woman was inside of the man. She was taken out. Now she's the spirit that governs the body. She was the last thing created. She is the glory. Mother gives her in covenant to the man to teach him the truth of heaven. And she tells us in Isaiah 59 in the last verse, she says, I give in covenant my spirit with the word. All right? Now Adam rejected his wife. He did not want a covenant with the righteous spirit, and he chose one with the harlot spirit, represented by Lucifer, I believe. And eventually that harlot leads him down some pretty sick paths. And we did a study on the abomination that maketh desolate, okay? And then it says, more are the children of the desolate than of she, and that word for she there is 1166. It's really a husband ruling over you. So the idea that we discovered was that he fell in love with himself, his own image, eventually over time. And he exalts himself as a god in the earth. That's what this harlot spirit does. But we're told that it is the laws that come from Mount Sinai that has Hagar and her children under bondage. Okay, so we're yoked. So over time, the daughters of Zion came to be yoked under the law. Their power came to be yoked. All right. Now, it says, stay yourselves and wonder, cry ye out and cry. They are drunken, but not with wine. They stagger, but not with strong drink. All right. So you're blinded and you're staggering. But you're not drunk with wine or strong drink, you're actually staggering about and you're stumbling because you have clay on your eyes. That's what you have on your eyes. Okay. And it tells us this. It says, for the Lord has poured out upon you the spirit of deep sleep. Now she says oftentimes and through the Psalms, arise, O Lord, arise, right? Stand for us. Plead your case for us, it says, all right? So the idea here is that she has caused these daughters of Zion, the spirit, which we know is the Azazel goat that was cast out into the fields of the Gentiles, whereupon she will be reborn out of the ashes, all right? And we're going to show you where it says that. For the Lord has poured out upon you the spirit of deep sleep, and hath closed your eyes, the prophets and your rulers, the seers, has she covered. All right, God is she, not he. And the vision of all is become unto you as the words of a book that is sealed. So they no longer understand the word, which men deliver to one that is learned, saying, read this, I pray thee. And he saith, I cannot, for it is sealed. I can't tell you how many times I've heard that. Well, it's just something we'll never know, they'll say. You know, you could study the Bible to the day you die and you'll never understand what it means. Certain passages, you're just never going to understand it. I've heard that I don't know how many times. And that's the clay that they put on your eyes, okay? Verse 12, and the book is delivered to him that is not learned, saying, read this, I pray thee. And he saith, I am not learned. So they make up all kinds of excuses why they don't know what the word means, all right? Because God makes it so hard for us to understand what God's will is for us. No. Man does that. Fallen man does that. The harlot spirit that he's in covenant with does that. All right? But God never did that. God makes it very straight, very plain for us to understand. And this only begins to open up to you. The clay begins to come off your eyes when you begin to realize that you must factor in the daughter Zion into her rightful place, and she is called the key of David. She is called the government of God. All right. Verse 13. Wherefore the Lord said, for as much as this people draw near me with their mouth and with their lips do honor me, but they have removed their hearts far from me, and their fear toward me is taught by the precept of men. Again, we're coming down to Baal, the words of Baal. In Baal, we know women were told, a law was decreed by the king in the book of Esther that every woman in his kingdom would bow down to her Baal as Lord and Master. And Baal there is husband, B-A-A-L. And in Jeremiah 23, Mother tells us, you have forgotten my name for Baal. I told you who Baal was. It is your husband who wants to rule over you as Lord and Master. And then if we go back further from that into Genesis 49, into Joseph's blessing, who is the birthright holder, no man holds the birthright. A woman holds this. And this is the daughter Zion. And birthright means that she governs her children. All right? This is her mantle that she wears, and she governs them. She is the queen. She is the rightful queen. She is the rightful ruler that was denied her rightful place. And Adam chose a covenant with the harlot. Okay. For as much as this people draw near me, and it is taught by the vain precept of men. She says, you don't even know who I am. All right? But she says, therefore. She says, you don't know me right now. But she says in verse 14, therefore, behold, I will proceed to do a marvelous work among this people, even a marvelous work. These are your women to be wondered at, your great marvels to be wondered at. A work and a wonder, for the wisdom of their wise men shall perish, and the understanding of their prudent men shall be hid. And she makes that a promise in Jeremiah 5. She says, your men are wind. But she says, what they did to my daughters, removing truth and putting them in so much pain under the law so that they could not birth the truth, which is what they are responsible for in order to birth the children, which are mother's children. Mother Jerusalem gives life to all things. They're her children. They were always her children. And the Shulamite says, my own vineyard I have neglected. Right? She says, I've been forced to take care of his. But my own I have neglected because my mother's sons were angry with me. They didn't want me ruling. They didn't want me as the rulers. So they created law that put a yoke on her. The yoke of the law is what we're under right now. But she says there'll come a time when your wise men, the knowledge of your so-called wise men are going to perish. But it's going to be my daughters that's going to stand up and show you the truth. And it's only these daughters that can deliver the children. Woe unto them that seek deep deep to hide their counsel from the Lord, and their works are in the dark. And they say, oh, who seeth us, and who knoweth us? So what they're saying is, all that we have done, all that these sons of Baals, these sons of Belials have done, all right, to keep the righteous daughter yoked, all right, that means to keep her power restrained and keep her from realizing who she truly is. They believe that no one sees them. But this is what Mother says to them in verse 16. She says, surely your turning of things upside down shall be esteemed as the potter's clay. For shall the work say of her that made it, she made me not? Or shall the thing framed say of her that framed it, she has no understanding? And that's what she says to them. She says to these men, you rejected my righteous daughter Zion as your ruler, as your queen, that gives you the laws of heaven, that allows you to live eternally. You rejected that. And you wrote the law that put her under bondage. And then you lied and you exalted men as God in the earth, as what gives you life. And she says to her daughters in Hosea 2, she says, you turned away from me. You turned to your husband as if he's what gave you life. And you turned away from the one that did give you life. She says, I do that, and I alone do this. And then she says, in another passage, I'm not sure if it's Hosea 2, and it is Mother speaking. They got, a husband's going to betroth her to him. No, that's not how it works. It is a mother that chooses the bride for the son. She's talking about her children here. All right? And we're not going to go into that because it still ain't hit the point that I want to hit yet. Because I'm busy trying to explain this to you. Because she says, you told my daughter that she has no part in this rule. She says, you created lies that subjugated her and put a yoke on her power so that you could thicken yourself with thick clay and that you could swallow down riches. When my daughter ruled, she ruled with laws of equity and with fairness. All the riches were equally distributed, is what it looks like. But these men of Baal, who desired power, who desired to build themselves up as gods under the law, which is the covenant with the harlot spirit, all right, wherein he comes to govern himself. And this is where we have the key of David in total opposition to the key of Solomon. And we've done our study on the key of David. We've proven the key of David is the daughters of Zion, who is the government of God. God gives these daughters, 144,000, in covenant to the men, to rule them, to show them the laws of equity, of fairness, all right? And she says, you rejected her, and you made a whole bunch of laws, and you yoked my daughter, and you yoked her power, and you told her that she don't give life, that he does. And then she says in Romans 1:20, she says, you're without excuse not to understand the Godhead, and manifested it in the things that I created. And she says, it's clear in this creation that it is my daughter that births life. It is not no man that does that. But you tell her that it's a he, and that she's got no part, other than that he had to die for her. Well, no, Christ died to restore her back to her rightful place, because fallen Adam wanted nothing to do with her. And therein came on death, because he made a covenant with the harlot, which is represented by Hagar with her children under bondage of that law that came from Mount Sinai. All right? That's what it's saying. Now, it says, and in that day, wait, verse 17. Is it not yet a very little while, and Lebanon shall be turned into a fruitful field, and the fruitful field shall be esteemed as a forest? Now, what I've come to understand, and I'm still studying Lebanon, and that part into the whole thing. But it looks like the daughters of Zion were considered a forest that grew in Lebanon. And it speaks of how these men, these woodcutters come in and cut down the trees. And they said, razz it to the ground. And it's an image of them removing these daughters of Zion out of their rightful place. And then we get that picture of Solomon tearing down their houses, ripping down the daughters of Zion's houses, because they would pass through the breach in the wall of David his father. And he daubs this up. He takes harlot wives from surrounding nations, which puts him in charge of governing the body. So it's a man inside of a man is your imagery there, which is the abomination that maketh desolate. So more of the children of the desolate than of she who has a husband. They rejected her, did not want her, wanted a covenant with a harlot. And so, all right, they turn everything on its head, and they say, esteemed as the potter's clay, right? That's what she's saying here. She says, you turn everything upside down. Right? It shall be esteemed as the potter's clay, for shall the work say of her that made it. Well, whose body shapes the body of children, of men, of women? It is the woman's body, and it is her body that gives life to it as well. All right? The lungs are shaped. The heart is shaped. It's her body that does that. And then she travails to give birth to that child. All right? But she says, you turned everything upside down. You say it's man that does that. You say it's a he that does that, and she's got nothing to do except that she's to blame for the fall of it all, when it was really Adam that made a covenant with the harlot spirit, which then put Hagar and her children under the bondage of the law that come from Mount Sinai, whereas Sarah, representing the spirit, the righteous spirit from above, frees us. All right? And that's the manifestation of these daughters of Zion. All right, in real physical time and space. We are slowly becoming, that's what we are. We are slowly becoming who we were always intended to be. These daughters of Zion. Verse 18. And in that day shall the deaf hear the words of the book, and the eyes of the blind shall see out of obscurity and out of darkness. And she says there comes a time that's ordained by God, and it's a specific time when they're going to understand truth. The meek also shall increase their joy in the Lord, and the poor among men shall rejoice in the Holy One of Israel. I believe that's women, myself, although it may include men. For the terrible one is brought to naught, and the scorner is consumed, and all that watch for iniquity are cut off. Now, she says, you're going to have to cut them off, right? She says they're full of the harlot spirit. She says you cannot reshape them. She refers to them as dung. Well, you can't reshape dung. She says you will have to spread them. You'll have to cut them off. You'll have to spread them like dung on the open field, and you will have to burn out the root. The root that they're established on is the harlot spirit. But eventually they kick the harlot spirit off too. And that's where you see them in Revelations gnawing their tongue for pain, and they're in absolute darkness. All right? So in absolute darkness means, I think at this time, that it means that these daughters of Zion have actually managed to rise up into the second heaven and kick the harlot spirit out. And once she gets kicked to earth, he kicks her off. He says, I don't need you anymore. I'm God, right? And there you see him gnawing his tongue with pain, and he's in absolute darkness. That means a complete spiritual darkness. There's absolutely nothing in him now. Nothing that's keeping him alive. He's absolute walking death is what he is. And your tongue symbolizes your sword, which is typically the word of God. But he's gnawing his pain. He's gnawing his tongue here now. And it's all symbology. It's what it's showing you, that he's now even cutting off the words that exalted him as a god, which was gave to him by the harlot spirit. So he kicks her off, and he steps inside that body, that temple representing the body of male, and then he steps in and says, I'm God, I'm the one that gives life to it all, when he can't give life to nothing. And there you see in Jeremiah 30, why now do I see every man standing around with his hands on his hip as a woman in travail, and every face turned pale? It's not appointed unto them to deliver the children. It's appointed unto these daughters of Zion, whom you're going to have a choice whether to reject or receive their truth. And one of them is the manifested Spirit of Christ on this earth. Verse 21, that make a man, not a man, a woman, an offender for a word, and lay a snare for her that reproveth in the gate, and turn aside the just for a thing of naught. That's what these men of Baal did. This is what they did to their sister. All right? They rejected her. They caused her to take the blame, which you see the Azazel goat cast out into the fields of the Gentiles. All right? Wherein She speaks out of the dust, it says, out of the ground of the dust. Out of the dust of the ground. I said that wrong. Therefore, thus the Lord who redeemed Abraham, and it says she reproved at the gate. That was her job. That's what she did. All right? She's the judge. But they turned it all around and made her a liar. And therefore, thus saith the Lord who redeemed Abraham concerning the house. No, he didn't. She did. We talk about circumcision and how part of the covenant that Abraham agreed to involved circumcision, and it meant the cutting away of the foreskin, referencing that he would not desire a covenant with the harlot spirit, with the whore spirit. All right? That's what circumcision symbolizes. All right? And so he made this agreement with Mother, is what he did. Mother God, concerning the house of Judah. Judah shall not now be ashamed, neither shall his face now wax pale. Actually, it should read Israel. All right? Because Sarah, we know the woman's seed, Eve, was the blessed seed in the garden, and it follows a long lineage of daughters that continues to carry this blessing. Now, when the men of Israel began to reject the righteous rule of these daughters of Zion, they were cast out into the fields of the Gentiles. And it looks like out there they are reborn, is what it looks like, out of the dust and ashes. That's what it looks like, out of this body. And that's what this verse here in Isaiah 29 is alluding to. Let's get through the rest of this. So it says, concerning the house of Israel, Israel shall now not be ashamed, neither shall her face now wax pale. That again takes us back to Jeremiah 30 verse 6, where every man is standing around with his hands on his hips, as a woman in travail. And his face, why now do I see every man's face waxed pale? Here, Israel's face is no longer waxed pale. All right? She's no longer writhing in pain to bring forth. All right? It says, we have been with child. We have, as it were, brought forth wind. Well, we know wind meant empty doctrines. All right? She was not birthing her children. She was teaching her children, the vineyard, his lies. All right? She says, but my own vineyard I have neglected. Here, she is no longer neglecting her own vineyard. She is now birthing them through the words of truth, which is what her job is. Her face is no longer waxed pale. She is no longer in pain. He is, because he cannot deliver the children. He never could. Only God can do that, it says. Verse 23. But when she seeth her children, the work of mine hands in the midst of her, they shall sanctify my name and sanctify the Holy One of Israel, and shall fear the God of Israel. Verse 24. They also that erred in spirit shall come to understanding, and they that murmured shall learn doctrine. So for the first time, they're going to learn truth. All right? Now, if you understand, you've been following me, God's children, Israel, is not physical Israel. She tells us in Romans 9 who they are. And this is what she says in Romans 9. Let's just read it, okay? We'll talk until we can't talk no more. So we can pull this idea, but I am going to take you to the being born out of the dust. Her sacrifice is there in Psalm 68 in particular words. So verse 9, chapter 9 of Romans says this. Let's see, we'll start at verse 7. Neither because they are the seed of Abraham are they all children, but in Isaac shall thy seed be called. That is, they which are the children of the flesh. These are not the children of God. We're talking about Israel here. But the children of the promise are counted for the seed. This is the new Israel, reborn out in the fields of the Gentiles, and you claim your heritage only through the daughters, because Eve's seed was the blessed seed. It was the separated seed. And her seed came to be known as Israel, whereas the Adamic nation surrounding it was Adam and the harlot spirit seed. All right. For this is the word of promise. At this time will I come, and Sarah shall have a son. So we get Sarah there, just like you saw Hagar in Galatians 4. All right? You're looking at this in allegorical terms, and it tells us to do that. For those who says, no, you can't take it literal and allegorical. That's what's wrong with your understanding. You're not taking it allegorically. You're not taking it in terms where you to compare these two women to the two spirits and to the two covenants, one with a harlot spirit, one with a righteous spirit. That's exactly how you're supposed to interpret it. It says you are to interpret it in allegory. That's what it tells you to do. And then they try to tell you, don't take it literal. Well, if you don't take it literal, you're never going to catch on to what they did. You're never going to do that. But it says they have erred in spirit, but they will come to understand the truth, and they're going to grumble when they see who's in charge. They're not going to like it, because this doctrine has tickled their ears. They've consumed riches because of the law that exalts men under the law and debases daughters under the law. All right? And that's our yoke. That's what's restraining us. They have restrained our power under the law. We are to be under grace. That's what we were told. But we're not. Even with brethren who profess to love Christ and what he stood for. Well, Christ come to restore back the righteous spirit. All right? Not to exalt the harlot spirit in these ridiculous teachings that men are your Lord and your master. She says, I will remove the name of Baal out of your mouth, because he's not your Lord and your master. He never was. My laws are laws of equity. All right? It doesn't make him rich and you poor under those laws. My laws are fair to all. All are equal under that law. Now let's go to Psalm 68. All right? I'm sure that we're running out of time. Okay, let's go to 68. Psalm 68. Now this is all about the daughters of Zion. All right? They're called the congregation of God. Mother God indwelt these daughters. They were known as the daughters of Zion. They're a great army. Now this is the interesting thing about this passage. While it hasn't happened yet, it's happened, is the idea. And the more you get reading these passages, the more it plays out like, well, this has already been done. Right? And yet it's getting ready to be done again, type thing. So, yes, you have a stacked prophecy, but it's just amazing how it seems to work, right? And so let's read it so we maybe understand a bit better what I'm trying to say here. It says this. It says, to the chief musician, a psalm or song of David, let God arise, let her enemies be scattered. The God here is daughter Zion. The Lord appears in this passage, Lord 136. She is the judge that will strike through kings in her day. And we get this allusion to that here. So it says, let God arise, let her enemies be scattered, let them also that hate her flee before her. They hated her. They didn't want her for their ruler. Men wanted themselves. And just before I go on, if you want to go look up Marduk, Moloch, and Baal, or Baal, you're going to hear me say Baal, okay? It's Baal, but I'm going to say Baal. That's just the way I say it. But if you go look up and you study them on Wikipedia, saying you can study them in other places, you're going to come to the realization that while Baal started out to just mean, I'm not sure if it meant just master or if it just meant Lord, meant husband. And then over time it evolved, all right? And that you connect Marduk, or what's the other word there for Marduk? I forget it. But you can connect Marduk and Moloch to Baal, all right? So that you begin to get this idea that these men started out as men, these men of Baal, that's what they were, and it evolved to a king, and then from a king they made themselves gods. That's what they did. That's your evolution of these words, all right? And because Marduk is derived directly from the word king, the Hebrew word king. But it's amazing when you get reading through the information how you're going to realize how they're royally all interchangeable. And it really came down to men who then became kings, your rulers, who then became your God that you bowed down to and exalted as your Lord and Master. And it was a slow process. And it was a lot of violence perpetuated against the righteous rulers that over time really brought them low. And we're going to see that in Job 30 as we go. But we also see it here in Psalm 68 when that Lord that sits at Christ's right hand in Psalm 110 will strike through her enemies. And the Lord that's doing that here is also referred to as Yah, that rides in the heavens. So we know the Ancient of Days is the judge. She's also a she, not a he. Because this is daughter Zion that sits to the right hand of Christ, who will strike through her enemies, and she's the judge on earth. And but the Lord here is 136, and that is her number. And she's called the Sovereign Lord. And she was the rejected Lord. Men came to exalt themselves. They literally fell in love. It appears in the very end. They fall in love with their own image as God. They really believe that they're the God image that's going to deliver everything. And that is the abomination that maketh desolate, a man inside of a man. The temple represents the body, which is male. We know the woman came out of him from the very beginning. She represented the spirit that governs that body. So here we go. As smoke is driven away, so drive them away. As wax melteth before the fire, so let the wicked perish at the presence of God. So she's here to judge. And it's called the government of God. Romans 13 says you have nothing to fear of this government, this authority that comes from God, if you're doing that which is right. Verse 3, but let the righteous be glad, let them rejoice before God, yea, let them exceedingly rejoice. Sing unto God, sing praises to her name. Extol her that rideth upon the heavens by her name, Yah, and rejoice before her. She says, I laid the heavens out, and I dwell in them. I created them, I dwell in them. She is the one that dwells in the Holy of Holies. She created the Father to dwell in him. And it's the same down here. You see the woman inside of the man, but she's what gave him life. And then she was removed. She was given a portion of his body and receives a remnant of the Spirit. You're told that in Malachi 2, if you want to go in and look at it and see what he did and how he dealt treacherously with her, and how we end up with two covenants represented by two women who are then adversaries, all right, that fallen Adam created. That's why we have Christ dying to receive the key of David back to the body, to give it life, to restore it back to eternal life. And they are called the government of God. And it says in Romans 11, it says, if the rejecting of them be the reconciling of the world, what shall the receiving of them be but life from the dead? And it's talking about the government of God. It's talking about the daughters of Zion, who are now reborn out of the dust. All right. Now, we got that verse in Isaiah 29, you will speak out of the dust, after she is offered as a sacrifice on the Ariel, the hearth. All right. She becomes the ashes. All right. And the heifer represents Israel. Now, that's in that covenant, Genesis 15:9. It's also spoken of in Numbers 19 and other places if you want to go do your research. Just like the she-goat in the Genesis 15:9 covenant represents the daughter of Zion, who is chosen out to be the queen, who is also the one bride of Christ. Okay. Let me see here. Did I read all of that? She is a mother of the motherless and a judge of the widows is God in her holy habitation. She alone is the one that inhabits the Holy of Holies. God setteth, let me see here, God sets the lonely in families. She leads out the prisoners with singing, but the rebellious live in a sun-scorched land. What does that mean? It means no doctrine. A sun-scorched land with no water means no doctrine of truth, all right? So the rebellious, that's where they dwell. They dwell in a scorched land. Verse 7, O God, when thou wentest forth before thy people, when thou didst march through the wilderness, through the desert, the earth shook, the heavens also dropped at the presence of God. Even Sinai itself was moved at the presence of God, the God of Israel. Now let's understand, when Moses come down from the first time, he found the children committing idolatry. All right? So it was saying they were rejecting her, is what they were doing. And what goes down here, I believe, why the law is given from Mount Sinai, which we are told in Galatians 4, all right? The law that come from Mount Sinai put Hagar and her children under bondage because they wanted that harlot spirit, all right? When Moses come down, he saw that, all right? And daughter Zion saw it. And mother Jerusalem saw it. And so you see in Zechariah 11 what mother says to her daughter there. She says, fine, the men don't want you as the governing spirit. They no longer want you. So she says, take 2 staffs, write your name on it, and write the name of your inheritance on it, which was the daughters of Zion called Israel. And she says, I want you to snap that staff as a symbology that you are breaking your covenant with the men of Israel who no longer want you. They want that harlot spirit, a covenant with her that's going to allow him to do whatever he wants to do under the law. And so she goes to the men and she takes her mantle. Now these daughters are shown in Micah 2, I believe it's Micah 2, wearing mantles. And these men attacked them as if they were at war with them. And they were ripping these mantles off of these daughters of Zion. And these daughters of Zion passed through the breach in the wall of David. It's called the breach in the wall of David. We also get an allegory to that in Job 30, if you want to look at that. She says, they pour in upon me, in waves through the breach. All right? Because he allowed the harlot in. All right? And so they were overwhelming her. They were taking her mantle over, which is this body, all right? The harlot spirit. And then by allowing the harlot spirit in, he takes control himself. That's what he does. And so she takes her mantle to these, the priests who were perpetuating violence under the law. They were writing violence into the law. They were allowing violence under the law. They themselves were perpetuating it against the righteous daughters. Which eventually comes to exalt him under the law, make him rich under the law. And she takes her mantle and she says, what was it worth to you? And they say, well, 30 pieces of silver. And she thought that was a good price. Well, we know what Christ was valued at, 30 pieces of silver. He's her new mantle. But mother tells her in Isaiah 49, she says, I'm going to remake your mantle. Well, actually, she says that in Zechariah 11. She says to her, take that 30 pieces of silver and cast it to the potter's house, right? Because she tells us in Isaiah 49, she says to her daughter, now you will not only be a light unto the Israelites, but now you will be a light unto the Gentiles as well. And there her spirit gets cast out into the fields of the Gentiles. She's the Azazel goat to bear the sins of Israel upon her head. She takes the blame. And she does it daily. We're told that here in Psalm 68. Christ bore the sins. What was it, 6 hours on the cross? Or was it 9? Was he on the cross from 9 to 3 or from 6 to 3? I can't remember. And there he bore the sins, all right, of what fallen Adam did. But it tells us here that this Lord bore the sins daily. And that is the righteous spirit that man rejected out of this body, and she is shown being cast out into the lands of the Gentiles, whereupon she is reborn out of the dust of the earth, or out of the dust of the body. All right, and we're going to show you that. It says, the earth shook, the heavens also dropped at the presence of God. Even Sinai itself was moved at the presence of God, the God of Israel. This is daughter Zion, who is your God, gives life to you. Thou, O God, didst send a plentiful rain, whereby thou didst confirm thine inheritance when it was weary. So while we're looking at this in a past tense, we're looking at it in a future tense. As of right now, I believe God, Mother Jerusalem, daughter Zion, is sending a plentiful rain to her daughters. And she is now watering her inheritance, which is the 144,000 daughters of Zion that you saw her breaking her staff with as well. And it says the poor of the flock knew the words were true. That was the daughters of Zion who were bearing witness to what the queen daughter of Zion was actually doing, which was showing her breaking her covenant with these wicked men who no longer wanted the righteous spirit governing the body of Israel, Judah. They wanted the harlot, which would then put him in charge, exalting him as a God that gives birth to the body. He can't give birth to nothing. Bible tells you that. So Verse 10, thy congregation hath dwelt therein, thou, O God, hast prepared of thy goodness for the poor. Now, the congregation is these daughters of Zion. We've established this, and you can establish it right here. You go look the word congregation up, and it's going to tell you that this is a female congregation. It's feminine, and it means a great flock, a great army, host of women, which you get in the next verse, the Lord. And the Lord here in verse 11 is daughter Zion 136, gave the word, and great was the company of those that published it. Great was the army of women who took this word. Now, their saw is rivers splitting, cutting through the earth, all right? When man rejected the Spirit, we almost come with the separation of an ocean, the oceans, and then the land. When the Spirit is in her rightful place, it is the land that is cut with many rivers, right? Which represents the daughters of Zion bringing the truth, all right, to the body. And so that's why you don't see no ocean at the very end, because she's restored back to her rightful place, and it becomes a symbol of them cutting rivers and bringing the truth to the body. So these women are the women that publish this word. They bring it to you. Now, excuse me, this is where we're going to link it back to Psalm 110. Now, Psalm 110 is a pivotal chapter, and I'm going to have to wrap this up without really showing you what I want it to show you. How many? Oh, wow. All right. But in Psalm 68, this is where it's going to take us back to Psalm 110. And you're going to find three lords there. And those three numbers for those three lords is going to take you to chapter Genesis 18, I think. I think it's Genesis 18 or 21. And they're called three angels. And it's the same three numbers. All right? And it says that Abraham goes out and meets these three angels. It's not. It's these same three lords that you see in Psalm 110. And it is mother, son, and daughter Zion. All right? It's mother Yahweh. It is the son that sits to her right, which is Christ, who is made a priest after the order of Melchizedek. And to his right sits daughter Zion, who is the judge, who will strike through her enemies in the day of her wrath. Her number is 136. The Lord here is 136. And what does it say? It says, the Lord gave the word, great was the company of those who publish this. Talking about the women who proclaim the good tidings, the truth of heaven, who gives life to the body. They're birthing the body here. Verse 12, kings of armies did flee apace, and she that tarried at home divided the spoil. It says, kings of armies flee, they flee. All right? This is her striking through her enemies in the day of her wrath. If you want to go look those words up. All right? And this is the judge that sits to the right hand of Christ. She is daughter Zion. She is the queen of it all. She governs earth. Verse 13. This is where we get it. All right. Now, if I can remember where I wrote it down. It says, though you have laid among the pots, yet shall ye be as the wings of a dove covered with silver, and her feathers with yellow gold. Now we're talking about the daughters of Zion here. And the correct interpretation of this verse is this. All right. Now, let me see. Where did I write it? I did write it out. Just a matter of me finding it. All right. So this is what you're going to get when you go in and you look your words up on interlinear. You look them up on in your Hebrew concordance. And it's really a reference to Israel reborn out of the ashes of the sacrifice, which you saw her being sacrificed on the hearth in Isaiah 29. And then it says she will speak out of the dust of the earth. All right? She's being reborn. Watch what it says here in your correct translation in Psalm 68:13. Now, this is me doing this. All right? Though you lie in the midst of the fireplace as the ashes, as the sacrifice, yet shall you be as the wings of a dove. Now, the eagle references spirit. Here we have her as a dove, covered with silver, and her feathers with yellow gold. Now, if you understand the allegory to wings, it's an allusion to authority, heavenly authority, your wings, all right? You see that in reference to your seraphim and to your cherubim, or your cherubim. Wings reference heavenly authority. And the sixfold, those 6 wings of the seraphim, references the all-powerful. They have power in every direction. First, second, third heaven. They're God. All right? And that is the daughters of Zion, I believe. I truly believe that. But you're getting a reference to her power here, her spiritual power, her heavenly power with her wings. And she has laid in the midst of the fireplace, and it is fireplace there. Go look it up. You have laid among the sheepfolds. Go look the word sheepfolds up. Did I write it down? I should have wrote it down. But I get so carried away when I get studying. I believe it's 8240. Hebrew number 8240. Shaphat. Hook. Or perhaps fireplaces, ash heaps. And it occurs only 2 times. 68:13, Psalm 68:13, Ezekiel 40:43. So there you're having her rise up. So she says to her, so she's talking to Ariel here. She's talking to her daughter Zion. That's who she's talking to, which is Mother Jerusalem. We know they dwell between the cherubim as the authority and power of Israel, because we're told that in Isaiah 37 and 2 Kings 19 verse 21. If you want to go look those chapters up or verses up in 21 there, 2 Kings 19:21, they dwell between there. It's mother and daughter with the power, and they're the same ones that appear as those 3 angels there. All right, but you got to piece it together. Now here it says, when the Almighty scattered the kings. All right, this is her striking through her enemies. It was snowing in Salmon, it says. Now I've researched this word, and I can't help but think it's the old name for Jerusalem, which was Salem. I can't help but see that in that word. Now they'll tell you no, it's not, but I believe it was the ancient name of Salem for Jerusalem. That was what Jerusalem went by, or Jerusalem went by, and here they're just called Sam. So she's scattering those kings, those rulers, those false rulers who have took over her place of authority. She's scattering them here, and you see that that's what she does in Psalm 110. All right, how many minutes do I got left? I'm gonna have to wrap this up. I'm gonna be cut off. I'm gonna have to do another part to this. But let's read on. So we got to the ashes. So the hill of God is as the hill of Bashan, and the hill as the hill of Bashan, and high hill as the hill of Bashan. Bashan means ivory. So you have the idea that maybe we are looking at a snow-covered mountain, even though we're looking at the ancient term, I think, Salem is what I think. And it says, why leap ye high hills? This is the hill which God desireth to dwell in. Yea, the Lord will dwell in it forever. This is daughter Zion taking back her rightful place of rule. The chariots of God are 20,000, even thousands of angels. The Lord is among them. That's daughter Zion 136. As in Sinai, in the holy place. And she says, I forgot to wrap up on Zechariah 11. She says, if they don't want you, give them the emblems of a foolish shepherd. And a shepherd that will leave them, a shepherd that will not lead them and guide them into truth. If that's what they want, she says, give it to them. All right? And she does, and she leaves. All right? So it's a symbology of the righteous spirit leaving the body, the mantle. It's no longer hers. They want it the harlot. They want it themselves, ruling over it. So she says, let them have, the implements of a wicked shepherd. Let them have it. And so that's what they gave. And that's why the law came about on Mount Sinai, because they were so rebelling against her when they were bowing down to the image of a calf. Right? They were rejecting her rule, is what they were doing. And they were chasing after the harlot spirit. Blessed be the Lord, who daily loadeth us with benefits, even the God of our salvation. So it says, she daily bears us up. She is daily carrying our sins, our load. Well, if there's one thing Eve's got blamed for, it's for the whole fall. She has daily carried the burden. Every woman has carried that burden of blame. She's to blame for it all. It's her fault, her fault, her fault. That's her daily bearing the blame. All right? But these are a select group. All right? I don't know if they feel the blame deeper. I don't know what it is. But it says, many are called, few are chosen. And these are the daughters of Zion. It says, if the rejecting of them be the reconciling of the world, what shall the receiving of them be but life from the dead? These are the daughters of Zion that the wicked man rejected out of her rightful place. All right. And they blame her. Daily, Eve gets blamed. Her fault, her fault. She slept with Satan, or she slept with Lucifer. Well, then why do we have a man with two women representing two covenants? Because he's the one that let the harlot spirit in and then made a covenant with her, rejecting the wife of his youth. That's what it says in Malachi 2, who is his spirit that was given in covenant with him. But God shall wound the head of her enemies, and the hair is scalp, such as one that goeth on in his trespass, her trespasses. The Lord said, I will bring again from Bashan, I will bring my people again from the depths of the sea. There's the Lord rising from the sea that you see in 2 Ezra chapter 13. That's her. And she's bringing all of her inheritance, her 144,000 daughters of Zion, which represents the remnant of Israel. This is what is left of Israel, her inheritance. And through them, they claim the Gentiles. They are reborn out of the ashes, out in the fields of the Gentiles. All right? That's what we're seeing. They have seen thy goings, O God, even the goings of my God, my queen, in the sanctuary. The singers went before the players on instruments, followed after, and among them were the damsels playing with timbrels. Bless ye, God, in the congregation, even the Lord from the fountain of Israel. There's little Benjamin, and we go through here. Thy God hath commanded thy strength. Strengthen, O God. Queen will bring, the kings and queens will bring presents unto you. Rebuke the company of spearmen, the multitude of the bulls with calves, till everyone submit himself. Sing unto God. Oh, sing praises unto the Lord. That's daughter Zion. She is your rightful rulers. To her that rideth upon the heaven of heavens, which were of old, she doth send out her voice, and that a mighty voice. Ascribe ye strength unto God. Her excellency is over Israel, and her strength is in the clouds, and her witnesses. O God, thou art terrible. Out of thy holy places, the God of Israel is she that giveth strength and power unto her people. Blessed be God. Now, I was going to take us to another passage, but I don't really believe I have time, so I'm going to have to cut this off here. But the passage I wanted to lead you to is found in Job chapter 30, and there we find her being dissolved. Her substance is being dissolved to ashes, and we know it's her because when the sons and daughters of Israel mourn, they would put on a sackcloth, which represents the body, the male, and then they would put the ashes on the head that represents the spirit burnt to ashes, represented by that heifer that sanctifies the body. It's what sanctified Christ. She says, no man will stand for me, I'll provide my own son. And so she did that. And it was Israel. But it was the sacrifice of Israel that had to do that. When we see her rise out of the ashes, out in the Gentiles. So this is Israel being born out in the Gentiles, all right? But they return back to their land and they take it back. That's what it looks like. And it has a very spiritual connotation to it. They rise up in a very spiritual way, but they're manifested here in physical time and space, and they have real power. So I'm going to have to cut that off there. Thanks for any of you who watched the video. It takes the time to try to understand it. I'm sorry I didn't get to my points faster, but I want it to really factor in all the things that I've come to understand and am coming to understand. So I hope you liked the video. I hope the Lord leads you in the paths that the Lord hopes you're going to follow the Lord in, and that you understand what those are. And I hope you all have a nice day, and I hope maybe to put up a second part to this video. So thanks for watching, and may the Lord bless you.